Do not sign anything your husband gives you.
"20 minutes after I gave birth, a nurse leaned close to my bed and whispered, 'Do not sign anything your husband gives you, and do not let him leave this hospital with your baby.' At first, I thought the medication was making me confused. My husband, Mark, was standing only a few feet away. He was holding our newborn daughter against his chest. His blue shirt was open at the collar. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and tears were shining in his eyes. He looked like a man overwhelmed by love. But the nurse was not looking at Mark's face. She was staring at the black leather folder, tucked under his arm. That was the moment I understood something was terribly wrong. My name is Rachel Carter. I was 30, 5 years old, living in Denver, Colorado, and until that night, I believed I had a good marriage. Mark and I had been together for 6 years. He was charming and always knew what to say when I was afraid. During my pregnancy, he attended every appointment and painted the nursery himself. People told me I was lucky. I believed them. Our daughter, Lily, was born after an emergency cesarean section. I had started bleeding at home, and by the time we reached the hospital, everyone was moving fast. Doctors shouted numbers I did not understand. Mark held my hand and told me not to be scared. Then the room went white, and I woke up in recovery with pain in my stomach and a baby crying nearby. The nurse who warned me was named Tessa. She had kind brown eyes and the controlled voice of someone who had learned how to stay calm in a crisis. Before I could ask what she meant, Mark turned toward us. Tessa immediately smiled and adjusted my intravenous line as if nothing had happened. Mark brought Lily to me. When he placed her in my arms, I forgot the warning for one beautiful second. She was tiny and warm. Her dark hair was still damp, and one little fist rested under her chin. I kissed her forehead and started crying. Mark kissed me too. Then he said, "We have to take care of a few things while you're awake." He opened the black folder. Inside were several documents and a silver pen. Mark told me they were routine forms for our insurance, Lily's birth certificate, and the temporary management of my company while I recovered. He said the hospital needed everything completed before morning. That last part made no sense. My company had nothing to do with the hospital. I owned Carter Medical Supply, a business my mother had built from a rented warehouse. We supplied clinics and nursing homes across Colorado. After my mother died, she left the company to me. Mark had never officially worked there. Still, he often offered advice, and I sometimes let him sit in on meetings. In the last few months, he had pushed me to give him signing authority while I was on maternity leave. I had refused. Now, hours after nearly losing me and our child, he had brought the same request into my hospital room. I told him my vision was blurry and asked him to leave the papers on the table. His smile disappeared for half a second. Then he gently squeezed my shoulder and said we could try again after I rested. As he turned away, I saw a page near the bottom of the folder. Across the top, in large letters, were the words, "Irrevocable voting proxy." That was not an insurance form. Tessa told Mark that Lily needed a routine newborn examination. He objected, but she calmly reminded him that the pediatrician was waiting. Then she placed Lily in the bassinet and rolled her out of the room. Mark followed them into the hallway to make a phone call. Less than 2 minutes later, Tessa returned alone. She locked the wheels on the bassinet and handed me a folded piece of paper. On it, she had written 3 sentences. "Your chart contains a medical directive uploaded yesterday. It says Mark can end life support if you cannot speak. The signature does not match the one you gave me tonight." My entire body went cold. I had never signed a medical directive naming Mark. My attorney and oldest friend Nicole was my medical decision maker. Mark knew that. Tessa had noticed because my emergency admission signature was short and shaky. The directive had a perfect signature, but the middle initial was wrong. It used the letter A. My middle name was Elizabeth. Then Tessa told me something even worse. While I was still unconscious, Mark had repeatedly asked how long the hospital would continue treatment if my bleeding started again. He had also asked whether he could take Lily home without me. Those questions might have sounded like fear on their own. Together with the forged directive and the voting papers, they sounded like a plan. Tessa offered to call hospital security. I almost said yes, but I stopped myself. If Mark knew we suspected him, he could destroy evidence. I needed to understand what he had done and who had helped him. I asked Tessa for a phone. My own phone was in Mark's jacket. I called Nicole and told her only the facts. She asked Tessa to preserve a copy of the directive. Then Nicole told me to act tired, sign nothing, and keep Mark close. She would investigate the company from her home office. When Mark came back, I pretended I remembered nothing about the folder. For the next hour, he played the loving husband. He brought me ice chips, took pictures of Lily, and sent a smiling family photo to our families. Then he stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. I heard him speaking softly. He said, "She is awake, but she is weak. I can still get the signature tonight." After a pause, he said, "No, do not move the money yet." I stared at Lily and tried not to shake. Every few minutes, another memory returned with a different meaning. 2 weeks earlier, the brakes on my car had felt soft while I was driving downhill. Mark took the car to his friend's repair shop and claimed a hose had cracked. Days later, my doctor's office called about a request to send my pregnancy records to an unfamiliar email address. Mark blamed our insurance agent. And the night before I went into labor, Mark had brought me herbal tea. It tasted unusually bitter. He said pregnancy had changed my taste buds. I did not know if those things were connected. I only knew I had stopped believing in coincidences. At 2 a.m, Nicole called Tessa's phone. She had found the first piece of proof. For 8 months, a company called Summit Logistics had been billing Carter. Medical supply for deliveries that never happened. The payments totaled $842,000. Summit Logistics belonged to Eric Sloan, Mark's older brother. The payment approvals came from Daniel Price, my chief financial officer. Daniel had worked for my mother for years. He had hugged me at her funeral. I trusted him like family. Nicole also found emails showing that Daniel planned to sell our main warehouse to a private buyer for half its value. The sale required my approval, unless Mark obtained the voting proxy in his folder. They had stolen almost $1 million. Now they needed control of my company to hide it. But Nicole had found something else. 6 months earlier, Mark had purchased a $3 million life insurance policy on me. I felt as if the hospital room had tilted. Mark had not been waiting for our daughter to be born. He had been waiting for me to die. I wanted security to drag him away. Instead, I looked at Lily's sleeping face and forced myself to think. Mark believed I was exhausted, frightened, and dependent on him. For the first time, that belief could help me. Nicole contacted a Denver police detective. He wanted Mark caught using the voting proxy and proof connecting him to the false medical directive. So we gave Mark an opportunity. Tessa told him I was stable, but still at risk of complications. Then she left us alone, although security officers were waiting just outside the unit. I told Mark I was scared, that I would not recover quickly enough to protect the company. I said I wanted him to handle everything. Relief flashed across his face. He opened the folder so quickly that he dropped the pen. I asked him to explain each document, because the medication made it hard to read. Tessa had placed a recording device under the blanket near my hip. Mark did not know every word was being saved. At first, he repeated the same lies. He called the voting proxy temporary, even though it clearly said irrevocable. He claimed Nicole had approved it. Then I asked about my medical directive. Mark froze. I told him a nurse had mentioned it, but I pretended I could not remember signing it. He relaxed and said I had signed it at home after taking my nighttime medication. He claimed I had been too emotional to remember. That answer connected him directly to the forged document. I pushed once more. I asked what would happen to Lily and the company if I died. Mark took my hand and said, "I would have everything under control. That is why we need your signature now." He placed the pen between my fingers. I signed the final page, but it was not the voting proxy. While Mark had been out of the room, Nicole had emailed a harmless notice saying I was beginning medical leave. Tessa printed it and slipped it over the signature page. Mark was so eager that he never checked. He pulled the paper away, kissed my forehead, and said he needed to send it to Daniel immediately. The trap was ready. Mark walked into the hallway and photographed the document. A minute later, Daniel tried to submit the supposed voting proxy to our bank and transfer the company's reserve funds. Nicole had already warned the bank. The transfer was blocked. The account was frozen, and the attempt was recorded. Police arrested Daniel in his home office before sunrise. Mark was arrested outside my hospital room. When the officers approached, he tried to return to Lily. He shouted that he was her father and had the right to take her. I will never forget the look on his face when Tessa stepped between him and the bassinet. She was smaller than he was, but she did not move an inch. The officers found my phone, the forged directive, the voting proxy, and a second set of documents in Mark's bag. Those documents asked the court to name him Lily's sole guardian if I became medically unable to care for her. The investigation continued for months. Police found messages between Mark, Eric, and Daniel. They had discussed draining the company after Lily's birth. Mark believed my mother's trust would give him control as Lily's father if I died. They were wrong. That was the final twist my mother had left behind. Years before I met Mark, she had written a protection into the trust. If I died while my child was a minor, no spouse of mine could control the company or Lily's inheritance. Nicole would manage the trust with an independent bank until Lily became an adult. Even if Mark's plan had succeeded, he would never have received the company. He had risked my life, betrayed his daughter, and destroyed himself for money he could never touch. Investigators could not prove that Mark caused my emergency delivery or damaged my car. The tea was never tested, and the repair shop claimed the old brake parts had been discarded. But the evidence they did have was enough. Mark pleaded guilty to conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, and forging medical documents. Daniel and Eric accepted plea deals after turning on him. The court ordered them to repay the stolen money. We recovered most of it through seized accounts and property. I also divorced Mark. He asked for mercy because he was Lily's father. I asked the judge to consider that fact too, but not in the way Mark expected. I said a stranger had tried to steal my company. Lily's father had tried to steal her future while using her birth as cover. That made his betrayal worse, not better. Mark received a long prison sentence and no control over Lily or her inheritance. 1 year later, I stood in the Carter Medical Supply warehouse with Lily on my hip. My employees had gathered for the opening of a new program that provided emergency supplies to mothers who could not afford them. I named the program after Tessa. Tessa cried when she saw the sign. Then she held Lily, who reached for the nurse's badge, as if they had known each other forever. I still have difficult nights. Sometimes I wake up remembering Mark's hand around mine, guiding a pen toward the paper while our daughter slept beside us. But when fear returns, I walk into Lily's room and listen to her breathe. Mark thought my weakest moment would make me easy to control. He saw a woman injured, exhausted, and trapped in a hospital bed. What he failed to see was a mother who had just discovered exactly what she was willing to fight for. He thought holding my daughter made him the most powerful person in the room. He never understood that becoming her mother had made me fearless